All right, going over the surveillance settings for the VX-3000. This page configures automated health checks and failure detections for all the main system components. That's including the amplifiers, the speaker lines, the remote microphones being the RMs, and control inputs. You're starting off to the left, you're going to see battery check. What it is, it's used if the system includes a battery backup supply. It's useful for ensuring battery health and or preventing surprise failures during a power outage. So in this case, I have it, let's say I set it to 5 a.m. once a day, or you can do 12 hours or every 4 hours or every 2 hours. So it's going to check the battery at the interval that you specify to ensure its health. Beside that, you have the external ATT check for the attenuator check. What it is, it's used when external attenuators are in place, which is the volume control interfaces. It's useful for verifying verifying that they are responding or connected, and you can catch cable faults or module failures. From there, you have the amplifier/speaker line inspection if AC fails. So what it is, if a system loses AC power, this setting ensures that amplifiers and speaker lines are still checked at set intervals using DC. So same thing, you set the time, and say you set the time to 3 a.m., you're setting the intervals. From there, going down, now you will see the actual devices that you would have in your system. In my case, I have the VX-3004 here and a VX-3008. From there, you can now check specifically what you want to have checked in case of a failure. For example, on the main unit, I might want to just check the LAN A and B, or I could have DC. If I wish to have everything, there is an all where you can click all and everything will be checked instantly. If you don't want everything and just want specific things like DC power and LAN A and B, that can be done. Maybe just the amplifier. If you want specific control inputs to be checked as well, you can have that. And for the speaker line, if you want to check for an open, short, or earth, you can also check that as well. And just for a quick breakdown, when it comes to an open, it means a wire break. Short meaning a short circuit detection, and earth is a ground fault detection. All right, going over the internal EV settings. Starting off on the registration tab here. This page is for registering and organizing sound files used for automatic or manual broadcasts, such as emergency messages, alerts, or announcements. You could have from 1 to 1024 different messages. In each slot, you'll see the number it is, the sound source file, the name of that sound source file, and the volume. By default, the volume is at 0 dB, but you can adjust the volume up and down depending if the sound source file is a little bit on the lower end or the higher end, and you need to correct it. Once you do have a file loaded, you are able to preview it. As you notice, you will have a play and a stop because I have already uploaded one file here. So I'm able to preview that sound file that I uploaded. One thing to note is that your sound file that you do upload needs to be a WAV file. It needs to be mono, 48 kilohertz, 16-bit PCM format. If you try to upload a file that is not correct, you will get an error. So for example, if I try to hit load and I load something that is not formatted correctly, you get an error, and it tells you what you need to do to correct your file type. So just by following what it tells you, you should be able to correct that. And using free programs like Audacity, for example, you could easily correct that and you send sound file to the correct format that it needs to be. So why this page is important, This page is important because this is where you get to store, for example, your evacuation messages, your fire alerts, your general paging or chimes, or your multilingual instructions. All those messages can later be triggered by a remote microphone, control inputs, timer schedules, or emergency patterns. So best practices for this is keeping emergency messages in the first few slots, for example, like 1 to 5, and name your files clearly. Like, for example, fire evac, or alert beep, or all clear. As long as your names are clearly, that should help you for finding it and using that file correctly. And that goes over the registration tab. So now going over the EV message settings. This page lets you define how each emergency voice message in your system behaves, including its name, function, and control behavior. These messages are pre-recorded audio files registered in the system. This was done on the registration tab. So starting off, you have the EV message number. What this is, it's a drop-down with arrows to scroll through your messages from slot 1 to all the way down to 1024 if you have that many. Each number represents one message previously registered. What it's for? Well, you can navigate between all loaded message slots. You can also configure the settings for each one individually. One tip is to note that the slot numbers match the row on the registration tab. Meaning, if I go to number 2, or actually just go to number 1, that matches this one to number 1, and so on. Next, you have the EV message name. In this case, as self-explanatory, is the name that you want to call this one now. Right now it's message 1, but I can call that test, for example. It's just for changing the name. We're gonna call it M1 for now. From there, you have EV broadcast from. So what this is for will define which unit or frame is responsible for outputting the message. From there, going down, you have the control settings. This drop-down determines the purpose and behavior of the EV message. So right now it's not used, but you see below we have alert, evacuate, registration, general, and BGM. What going over each one means. So now if you put it under alert, what it means and what it's used for is that the first phase emergency, it plays a warning or attention message before evacuation. Lower priority than evacuate, of course. From there, you have evacuate. Second phase emergency, pretty much. So this plays the main evacuation message. For example, evacuate immediately. This will override alert. From there, you have restoration, where a message played after an emergency ends. For example, all clear. The situation is safe now. Going down from there, you got your general. This, as you know, is non-emergency regular messages. For example, daily announcements or building notices. And from there, last but not least, you have the BGM, which is just background music. Plays only when no higher priority message is active. Ideal for idle times. So why this page matters? It tells the system how to treat each message in terms of priority, purpose, and broadcast conditions. It ensures messages are triggered correctly by control inputs, events, or timers. It lets you build multi-phase emergency patterns, which can be very useful in many different cases. And that goes over the EV message settings. All right, going over the chime settings for the VX-3000. This tab allows you to define chime tones that play before or after an announcement, emergency message, or a paging broadcast. Think of these as audio cues that grab attention to indicate the start or end of a message or a polished experience to broadcast. So what you see is the number. It goes from 1 to 1024 because that is the max that you can have. The chime names, by default you have user chime 1 all the way to 1024, but you could change that, and it's great to make those names clear. The clearer the names are, the better it is for you as a programmer to set this up. And your sound source. In my case, my sound source is alert because the sound file that I uploaded, the name of that sound file is called alert. So now a situation where this is very useful is maybe a fire alarm where you want the pre-tone chime before, let's say, evacuate message, right? So it works in that case. For paging, you can have a short tone before and or after a mic broadcast. Some notes to keep in mind is that you can assign the same sound source file to multiple chimes. And these chimes can later be linked in event settings or microphone settings. And that goes over the settings for the chime settings. All right, going over the priority settings for the VX-3000. This page lets you assign priority levels and types to all audio inputs in the system, including analog audio inputs, paging microphones, background music, EV messages and chimes, or remote mics such as the RM200SF. This ensures that the system knows what to play first when multiple sources are active. So notice in this section, you're gonna have, or you might have, internal EV, chime sound source, audio in, VX-3000 PM, or an RM. This won't show for every time. It depends on what you have applicable in your system. One thing you will notice is that in each row, we will have the audio source name, the type, either that be BGM, general, or emergency, the priority, and same priority. Same priority meaning when something's at same priority, what's it going to do? How is it going to behave? Is it going to play the first one that came, or is it going to play the last one that came? So going back to the types now, looking more into the emergency warning, one thing to note, as probably already mentioned, emergency is the highest priority. This will interrupt everything else. So if anything on BGM or general is playing, if something on emergency is active, it will interrupt that. This is used for alerts and evacuation messages or emergency mic inputs. The priority levels are typically within 1 to 50. So here I have it at 50. So if you have different ones, of course, you could adjust it even further to give you more play around of which ones exactly are even more higher priority within emergency warning priority. From there, we have now our general. General, this is normal paging or announcements can be used to override BGM if set with higher priority. And typically this is within my start up at 600. I have mine a little bit too high right now, but it starts off here at 600. And typically you would want to, if you have others and you need to lower it, you can adjust it and bring it within 500 to 513 if need be. If you need to make it higher, of course, you are welcome to do so. But now, what this is normally used for is it's for microphone announcements, scheduled voice messages, and just general use of RM paging. And now last, we have the BGM. By default, BGM has 800, which is, to tell, BGM is the lowest priority here. And it's automatically silenced when any of the other two, if general or emergency audio plays. So for default, like I said, this is at 800. But again, you could adjust that further. So if you have other BGM and you want to adjust it in a way where you want certain BGMs to have higher priority than other BGMs, you can do that. So just going over when it comes to your defaults, by default, every time, emergency will be at 50, general at 600, BGM at 800. Those are your defaults, but you're always able to change those as need be. And that goes over the priority settings for the VX-3000. All right, next we will go over the pattern settings for the VX-3000. So on this section, first we have your zones. Your zones is how you can actually assign what your actual zones are with all the different units you have. In this case, zone 1, I could have 1, 2, 3 on my 08 and just the 1 there. Zone 2, maybe it's wanted to have just that. And let's say zone 3 has, it's like an all call maybe. So self-explanatory, this is where you get to set up your zones. The number of zones that you can have go up to 1024. From there, we have our base pattern. The purpose is that it defines the zone selection for a zone pattern. Usage is used as a foundation when building other patterns like general or emergency broadcast. So as you can tell, you have the number as again 1 to, in this case, 32. The name of that pattern, the audio source, either that be the EV message, audio input or aux. In this case, it's the EV message, but I don't have any EV messages here. And just like with the zone, you're selecting which one to apply to it. I could have all. I have the one. From there, next we have our general broadcast. The purpose is that it defines which EV message, audio inputs, or chimes are used when this pattern is triggered under general or non-emergency conditions. So let's assign the audio source, either be the chime, the EV message, or the mic, the pre or post chimes, the broadcast volume, the fade in / fade out settings. So this is great for background announcements, staff paging, and scheduled alerts. From there, we have the control outputs. The purpose of this is to trigger external control outputs. For example, relays, contacts, when this pattern is active. So it can be used to activate things like fire doors, flashing warning lights, essentially any sort of external equipment that could use contacts. Each pattern can control multiple outputs based on the zone or broadcast type. The other tabs that are available when applicable are the emergency sequence, emergency broadcast, and the emergency broadcast status interlocking. For the emergency sequence tab, the purpose of this is that it defines a step-by-step sequence or action to follow when an emergency is triggered using this zone pattern. For the emergency broadcast, the purpose is that it directly assigns emergency messages to this pattern. And for emergency broadcast status interlocking tab, the purpose now is that it lets you link the status of one pattern's emergency broadcast to trigger other automatically. And now beside that, we have the failure. The purpose of this tab now is it specifies what to do if something goes wrong, like an amplifier failure, power supply failure, a line fault / open or short. You can set backup amplifier zones, alternate messages, or trigger outputs. This ensures system reliance and compliance during hardware failures. All right, going over the event settings. First tab is the control inputs. The purpose of this tab, it's used to assign system functions to contact inputs. They are physical terminals that can receive signals from buttons, alarms, or sensors. So the key fields here that you'll see is the name, that's the input channel label, the function, this is the assignable role like evacuate, alert, general broadcast, not used, etc. like that. The polarity, so this is if it's going to be like normally open or normally closed. The related control output, so this triggers a control output relay. And then the context, what message or sound should be played when triggered. So an example use case now is, say you have contact in 1 assigned to evacuate, which will trigger an evacuation message when a fire alarm panel activates it. That's just one use case. Moving over now, we have the RM tab. The purpose of this is that it configures buttons actions on the RM500 or RM200 remote microphone. So you see here on my system, I have the RM500 as shown here. And if I go here, I could also have the RM200 as well. So here in the field, you're going to have, again, assign talk, all call, F1 to F2, aux, and key 1 to key 10. And then you're also going to have now the related control outputs. This allows pairing microphone buttons with relays or playback. And from there, we have our context. This is to choose what message or chime or broadcast happens when each button is pressed. So example use case now is, let's say we assign key 1 to play message 1 to zone 1. Or maybe assign F1 to start BGM. These are just use cases where this is how you could use the system. All right, next we have the CT event setting tab. This is for the VX-3000 CTs if you have. So on this tab is for programming your VX-3000 CT control panels that have physical volume knobs from volume 1 to 8 and keys that go from 1 to 9. So as you see here, you got from 1 to 8 volume knobs, and then keys you got from 1 to 9. So the key fields here are the functions. Each knob or key can be assigned to control audio playback, volume zone, section, etc. The context is so you can determine what the key or knob will trigger, either that be message, pattern, chimes, and so on. So for an example, if you have, let's say, volume 1 adjust, let's say the background music in zone 1, for instance, and then you could also have key 3 start a pre-recorded announcement. So that is one use case that you could do with this. From there, next we have the fault LED setting. So now the purpose is that it links system error types to the LED indicators on the front panel of the VX unit. The options being you have the unit for general internal failure, emerge mic for emergency microphone fault, network for LAN error, power for power supply issues, and fuse in case if fuse is blown or DC power fault. So now the use case: if power fault occurs, the front panel LED labeled power lights up for easy diagnostics. All right, going over the audio network output settings for the VX-3000. So this tab is used when the NX300 is a part of the VX-3000 system. It allows you to link NX300 zones to VX-3000 amplifier zones over an IP network. So one thing you'll see here is the IP addresses, the equipment, the zone, the NX zone priority, and the VX zone. So for IP addresses, this will be the address of the unit of the NX300. The equipment, it'll be NX300, of course. For zone, that'll be zone 1 or zone 2. And then you have the NX zone priority. The NX zone priority is very similar with the other priorities. The lower the number, the higher the priority. The higher the number, the lower the priority. In this case, I'll keep it at 6. Next, you have the VX zone, which zone this will affect. So let's say zone 3, and why don't I make this zone 7. So something to note, for this tab, you need to have a NX300 in your system. So if you did not have an NX300 in your system, this tab won't be visible to you. It'll be grayed out. So for example, if I remove my NX300, I make it none, go back to my event settings, you'll see that the tab is now grayed out. So now if I go back to my network settings and I say I have an NX300, and you know, I say that I have 2 NX300s, why not? Go into my event settings, and now you see the tab is there. And now I also have the other NX. So my IP address is for 100, that's for my first NX, and then 101, that's my other NX. Again, these addresses, they don't need to be this exact IP address, they can be changed. That's always done in the network settings here, where you can change that to what it needs to be. So that's just something to note. So one way to work now with the NX zone priorities. So you could organize this as you wish, but one way that we can recommend to set up your priorities would be to set priority 1, for example, for like evacuation level, like a fire or something like that. Think of it like that. Your priority level 2, that could be like emergency alerts. 3, you're looking at critical live messages, maybe. 4, that could be your scheduled tone/alerts. 5, now you're looking more into general paging. 6, this is more of like informational reminders, maybe. 7 could be your background music. And 8 could be something even less than background music. So there's different ways to, of course, rank this. This is just one example of ranking the priorities. Obviously, depending on your system, you might need to rank it a bit differently. But that's just one simple standard that you can rank it. And with that, that goes over everything for the audio network output setting.
Dr. Sound. TOA.